Hi, welcome to the Valley View. I'm Kim Brosh. This is my co-host,
Ken Adams.
Ken Adams, and today we have Michael Donnely with us, and he's going to talk to us about conspicuous consumption, overconsumption, issues to do with protecting our planet. So, Michael.
Welcome to the show, Mike.
Well, thanks.
Good to have
Good to be here.
And you know, like when I originally brought up this topic, that was the thing that you kind of wanted to concentrate on was overconsumption
Right.
in our environment, and it leads to a lot of other problems. And so maybe you could give us like a short introduction to the whole subject then,
Okay.
or a place to start with anyway.
All right. Well, a little history. I've been an environmental activist for a long time, since the 70s or whenever. And I was involved, I was the vice president of the Oregon Natural Resources Council for 10 years. And during that time, we pretty much started up the Ancient Forest campaign to save what we could of what was left of the ancient forest here in Oregon. And I'm a co-founder of the Friends of Opal Creek, and that's probably our greatest success story, as people in Salem know.
I remember that whole story.
Yeah, and then I was a member of the Brighton Bush community, and we restored the old hot springs east of here, and now it's up and running, and one of the bigger employers in the area out there with 80 people now, and
Wow,
it's doing really
that's
good. And
impressive.
part of that process was that the forest around Brighton Bush was scheduled to be logged off too, and now there's a 49,000 acre late successional reserve there because thousands and thousands of people, literally thousands of people, stepped up for Brighton Bush and Opal Creek. And
That's wonderful.
so that's kind of my history. And I started, well, to be honest, when we first started Brighton Bush, we were a bunch of hippies hiding out from the world. And the world came toward us in the form of chainsaws and whatever. Plus we had a business where we were bringing people in. And so I started to get educated on the whole forestry issue and just see how that all ties together environmentally and, you know, what we're doing on this planet. You know, I mean, there's 7 billion of us now on a planet that for millions of years had, some people say, less than 350 million people. So, and
Right.
when I was born, there was like 2 billion people. So,
Wow.
so it's like,
Yeah.
what? You know?
Yeah, because even at the beginning of the 1900s, there was not even a billion.
Not even a billion, no.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of interesting you're talking about forestry because when I was in high school and early college, that was what I was kind of interested in. And one of the things they taught us, and this was back in the mid 60s, was that clear cutting was not good for the forest. You go in and you select trees to cut.
Right.
You don't just go and wipe out a hillside or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, it's like completely changed around now because economics drives what they're doing now.
Sure, it's way easier to grow a Douglas fir forest when when all sunlight can hit it. So if it's totally clear, it makes it easier. And the Douglas fir is the prime tree they want to get. So that's
Yeah, they don't
that's
care
what
about,
drives clear cutting. You know,
what a forest really is.
but yeah, you're right. In the forest thing, of course, it's driven by consumption.
Right.
You know, all the things
That brings us to our
make
topic.
we make from trees. You know.
Yeah.
And I have a really good friend who's a documentarian, Jeff Gibbs. He's the co-producer of Bowling for Columbine and Fahrenheit 9/11. We're Flint boys. We grew up in Flint, so if you want to,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So we know about consumption, and you know a lot of the downside of it too, growing up in Flint. But he's been working on this new documentary called Planet of the Humans, and I've been kind of, you know, helping him with it and stuff. And it's all about that. And the more we dig into it, the more we dig. It's all consumption driven, and a lot of it is overconsumption and just silly, unnecessary consumption. And
I mean, a lot of the damage to the planet.
yeah, well, all you know,
Well-
the
subject of the book.
yeah, what's going on? How dire the situation is, really,
Right.
and what we can do. Some of the things we can do about it. You know, I mean, there's the obvious stuff like consuming less and recycling when you do use, and everything. But we don't have a real ethic of, is this really necessary? You know, and you don't really know what the cost is. You know, like you hop on a plane and fly off on some junket somewhere. Well, that plane is filled with oil that came from the tar sands in Canada. You know, and that's destroying whole ecosystems. And then electricity. You know, we have, you know, people go, oh God, look at my great new electric car, aren't I great? Well, it's a coal car.
Right, because
Or
that's where
here-
the energy is
Or
coming
out
from.
here yeah, or in the Northwest, it's a dead salmon car. You know, I mean, let's face it. You know, I mean, we're pushing things to the limit. I have a friend who's for 25 years has lived off the grid in a cabin with no running water, just no internet, no phone, any of that. And he took this. There was this online survey you could take as what your personal carbon footprint
Right,
is.
your carbon
Right.
footprint, yeah.
And so he entered all that stuff in, and because he has a Jeep, which he hardly drives, that's one of the main reasons. Even someone at his level of consumption, it tells you in the end how many planets worth of resources we would need if everybody, all 7 billion of us, lived at your level.
Yeah.
And at his level, it's 2.5 planets.
Right, because most people are at a really lower level, like in India and China
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, yeah. Yeah, that's true. In this country, we have a relatively average large footprint.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
more than
Yeah,
what
but
we
I mean,
can-
but what you're saying is somebody is living in a cabin with no running water.
No electricity.
needs
and-
2.5 planets.
Yeah,
So
and I
what
mean
do
that
the
that
rest
is
of
pretty
us?
crazy.
If everybody
Yeah.
lived that way. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we're looking at. But we don't notice it. You know, I mean,
Right.
you talk about people living this, living on less than $2 a day. That's billions of people.
Billions.
2 billion people a day don't even have access to clean water, and yet we use it to defecate in and get rid of our everything else, and we don't even think
And
about
just
it.
leave
We're
the
just
water running all the time.
right,
you know,
brushing
hot
your
water.
teeth. You run the
Yeah.
thing full speed. You don't. We don't
Right.
even think about it, and yet.
Well, I think that's a lot of the problem that I see, because I can remember having a conversation with my sister-in-law and her husband like 30 years ago, and I said, the more stuff you accumulate, the more you got to carry around with you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Yeah, you buy all this stuff, and now, well, we need a bigger house almost, you know, and it's just kind of crazy. And one of the interesting books that I kind of read is the Jack Reacher novels, where it's this, it's a fictional thing, and it's a guy that used to be in the military, and he travels around, he hitchhikes, he walks places and like that, but all he carries around is a toothbrush. He doesn't carry anything else. And like somebody was asking, well, how do you live like that? And he says, well, do you enjoy, keeping your house up? Do you enjoy, keeping your car moving? And I always saw an interesting study, this was years ago, about the cost, if you're going to have a race from, say, here to Los Angeles, and I'm on a bike and you're in a car, who's going to win? Well, obviously the car. Well, no, you got to pay for the car first. You got to pay for the bike first. Okay.
off.
Yeah, but I mean, if you count that time that it takes to buy the car, the insurance, the gas, and everything else, you're only doing, I think it was like 8 miles an hour. Well, I can almost do that on a bike for a long distance. I can easily do 6. And, if the ground's fairly level, I can probably do about 12 to 13, something around there, even in my condition at this age.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, see, people think, oh, I already got a car. Well, you don't think about what it costs you in the way of time and
Right,
everything
time.
else to buy it.
Right.
Well, most people are not calm enough or centered enough inside to spend that time walking instead of like hurrying doing something. Everybody's just kind of agitated and wants to be doing something all the time.
So they're on the little
They're on the
hamster
little
wheel.
hamster wheel.
That's a big part of it. If you're so busy, you're going to have to consume more.
You have
know,
to consume more,
And you're talking about all this stuff. I mean, it might have been George Carlin said that stuff expands to fill the available space.
Yeah, right.
It
does.
That's what happens. I feel overwhelmed with stuff, and I try not to have a lot of
Right.
stuff. You know.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm something of a pack rat myself, but I mean,
I think that's because we feel kind of wedded to our stuff. We don't feel like it's right to get rid of our stuff. I mean, for me personally, once I get something, I feel like it's not right to like toss it aside afterwards.
well,
I
yeah,
should,
but other
you know.
people might be able to use it. My problem is that inevitably when I get rid of something, I need it the next week or two. I don't know what that is, but it was kind of something that always seemed to happen
Right.
to me.
Happens to you.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about Jeff in the movie and looking into just the consumption levels, and like I was saying, that's where the 350 million people for centuries,
Yes, centuries.
as we're looking into it, that seems to be the actual carrying capacity of the planet.
Right.
And we're just way
and then
beyond
we
it.
started, at the same time we started having population growth, we started having a thing growth, object growth, where we make on all
Right.
these objects and stuff, and they kind of went side by side. So
Sure.
no wonder everything's getting really out
Well,
of hand.
yeah, and some of this is also in parallel with cheap energy.
Right.
And like when we talk about oil, you can almost match the growth of the population by the use of oil.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the thing is like we are now on the downhill side of oil because it's not being made anymore. Okay.
Right, I think they put that
Right, and they're
1,000,000
going
years ago or
after
something.
stuff that's very hard to get, like the tar sands has less return,
And has bigger environmental impact.
Right.
It's not exactly in like all these pipelines they're talking about. There's problems with this stuff in the pipelines. You know, they're probably going to have a lot more oil spills and like that. But the thing is even that it's going to become progressively more expensive to get that cheap energy. And then what are you going to do? You know, because the thing is oil is used for a lot of other things other than just transportation.
Right.
That
Pharmaceuticals even. Yeah.
well, yeah,
Which
and I
are
mean,
important and life-saving.
food.
we're dependent on fossil fuels for our food, not just to transport it, but to even grow it.
Harvest it.
Right.
You know, the nitrogen
Fertilizer.
fertilizers come from natural gas. You know,
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's one of the things. It seems you said you could track it to the rise of oil, and like I said, we said less than 1 billion people at the turn of the year 1900.
Right.
And oil came in, and then deforestation and oil is what tracks humans. I think as Chateaubriand said, you know, a forest precedes civilizations, deserts follow.
Oh, man.
You know, and that was eons ago. People were onto that, you know.
And then sugar was kind of brought into the mix right about the same time. So we have all this energy to like do all this buying and making and everything.
Yeah, and you know, there's definitely strategies for lowering consumption that we have to start looking at. You know, I mean, like you say, the oil is being used for so many other things. Jeff, my friend Jeff, he thinks that we should, what's left of the oil, we need to use to
Preserve.
heat our homes to keep people alive,
Yeah.
and use the rest of it to as the basis for the transition to whatever we're going to use in the future. You know,
And we need to start that transition. And so
Right.
I also wanted to kind of let people know maybe some of the things that they could do maybe now, just kind of small steps to get them thinking in those terms about what they can do about their consumption levels. And it doesn't really impact necessarily your lifestyle that much because even if you go back to the 60s, it's not that hard a life.
No.
You know?
No.
There is so much stuff in America that you know, I live in a house that's recycled. Moved a house that was in the way of a government building and restored it. And I've done that with more than one house and more than one building. I'm part of a land trust in Washington State, and a group of us over the course of 20 years built a beautiful cabin house, and it's about 85% recycled materials.
Right. So one thing I've heard about the recycled homes, though, is that they're not as energy efficient as the newer homes. Is that true?
Oh, you mean like my house?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because when my house was built in 1920, there wasn't insulation in the walls.
Right.
There was a lot of things I had to upgrade.
Oh, you did.
Yeah,
upgrade
yeah,
on them.
a lot, but it's still in the long run it's better. You know, I mean, otherwise that house goes to the landfill, it's destroyed. Whatever carbon is sequestered in the 2x4s of that house are going to be released into the atmosphere. You know, everything. You know, I mean, it's overall it works. That's just one type of recycling. You know, there's.
I believe in recycling clothes. I think shopping at secondhand stores is really important.
Usually there's better looking clothes in
Better
there, too.
quality, because, yeah. And also you can access every era of style.
Right.
Whereas right now, if
Right.
you go to a store, you know, a department store, it's whatever's in style right now is all they have. You can't get like a certain kind of blouse that you liked from.
Oh, there's so many clothes and so much waste there. It's unbelievable.
much waste,
My
yeah.
my sister-in-law was a teacher, and she used to every year just collect all the clothes that were left at the school that nobody claimed, and then we'd take them over to Warm Springs, and I have friends that live at Warm Springs, and they'd take them to the Longhouse and just distribute them. You know?
Yeah, well, yeah, because I worked at a school a few years ago up in Sublimity, and like just the jackets they had left over took up almost the main hall.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Kids don't even go and look for them in the lost and found. Their parents, they just ask their parents for another one, and they go maybe to Goodwill and get them another one.
Yeah.
Throw
yeah.
away clothes.
Yeah, there's plenty of clothes there, and of course, as we see, our habit for cheap clothes is costing people their lives in Bangladesh and India and places like that. So that's a good place.
Very direct connection right
Well,
there.
well, not only that, but then we're getting back into that cheap energy paradigm where right now, using cheap energy, you can move clothes from India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan here to the United States. But that's not always going to be the case. And in the meantime, we've gotten rid of all those places here in the United States.
That
So
made
like you try to
clothes,
get
yeah.
shoes made here in America, you're probably going to have to go to a Renaissance fair to find those.
Oh yeah. Well, you're talking to a guy from Flint. I know all
Yeah.
about outsourcing. You know,
Yeah.
the city's half the size it was when I grew up, and all those jobs are somewhere else. You
The
know.
Flint, Michigan.
Flint, Michigan.
Right?
Yeah.
For the
General
GM
Motors
plant.
hometown. Yeah.
Amazing.
And, so yeah, I saw that all happen a long time ago. It started,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but yeah, without the cheap energy, how are we gonna do that? Keep that going, you know?
Right. And I mean, that to me is kind of like a wake-up call that we need to be facing now. If you wait till the crisis is upon you, you're going to make really bad decisions probably at that point, or you're going to be so limited as to what you can do. You know,
I
and like,
agree.
you know, like what you were saying about your friend Jeff saying that, you know, that we should preserve the oil for heating people's homes. I mean, because what are the alternatives? You know, when you run out of
Right.
natural gas and oil, you what? You're going to clear cut the rest of the forest, and that's going to last for how long? And you can look
Right.
at Easter Island and see how well that worked out for them. You know, that was.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about a population collapse. They used to have a fairly large population. They used the trees on the island to build those statues
Oh.
until the last tree was gone. And
They
now,
had a
Right.
statue obsessive
Those-
compulsive thing?
yeah, yeah, it was. But I mean, the thing is they were also relying on trade with other islands. So now they have no wood for boats.
Oh, I see.
So we don't want to end up in that situation because
Right.
the population just almost totally collapsed because as a result.
Yeah, that's happened over and over and over
Right.
throughout history. The deforestation is just like that quote I told you. You can trace it.
Precedes
Where are the
civilization.
cedars of Lebanon? Where are those massive forests in Greece and in Italy and even Ireland?
Where
you know?
is the forest in the United States? In the thin strip on the west coast, because it's all been wiped out as people.
Oh right, yeah.
progress
There's a
from east to west.
great graphic I've seen. That's the native forests and it's the map of the United States with the
Mm-hmm.
native untouched forests back in like the 1600s up until now, and you just see it shrinking.
And it's just a little strip along the west coast now. and that's
Yeah.
about it.
Well, New England still has a lot of
There's
trees.
well, they
Well,
still
they're
have a lot
not-
of trees,
they're
but
not-
functioning
yeah.
ecosystem forest that was originally there.
Oh well, yeah, it's changed.
changed.
It's
From-
going to take a long time. Like my friend Mike Roselle, who's one of the co-founders of Earth First, says, "Well, you know, 5,000 years from now, no one will be able to tell the difference." You know,
That's probably true, but if we're around, there won't be a 5,000 years from now.
Right.
If we keep up the way we are
Right.
now, anyway.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too, because like I look at, you know, we were talking about Flint, you know, about the job situation, and it seems like a lot of the jobs being created today don't require a lot of skills, at least here in the United States. I mean, a lot of the new jobs are like service industry,
Oh, we got a lot of service.
very little
Yeah.
manufacturing. So that's not going to allow for high incomes. I mean, manufacturing was what drives high incomes and your ability to pay for all those things. But if you don't have a society that's built on that, just on service, your standard of living is going to go down as a result. So people
Right.
kind of need to start thinking about those things now. You know,
Right.
well, they have resources.
There is sort of a good movement of people growing their own gardens now, and restaurants that have local produce in their for their
Yeah.
food or menus.
Well, yeah, and
That's
farmers
a good
markets
move.
and
And
like
farmers
that.
sure,
markets, yeah.
that's a percentage of it.
Right.
I mean,
you
that's
know.
one little thing
Yeah,
that
it's-
a person could do is
but-
plant something at their house.
Yeah. But actual farming, you know, that's tough. You know, my grandparents had a farm in southern Michigan, and you know, they had a 110-acre farm, and they basically supported 10 people with that farm for about 60 years through the Depression and everything else. You know,
And you mean they sold a lot of things too?
well, no,
Just
it was
for
mostly
food for 10
self-sufficient.
people?
They did sell
Right.
eggs and milk. You know,
Right.
but my grandfather farmed with horses until 1955. I was 6 years old. I can remember him.
That's awesome.
You know, but that's tough. You know,
So 150 acres for 10 people?
about 110
10,
acres.
yeah.
Yeah,
110 acres.
that's what it took. They
So
had
it's 10 acres per person to feed a person?
pretty.
Well,
As an
5 to
average?
10
Yeah,
generally
yeah,
is.
yeah.
And like, you know, like a lot of times, like not here in the United States, but they use hectares, and hectares
Yeah.
are 2.5 acres roughly.
Right.
And that is kind of considered a minimum for,
1 hectare per person?
yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
you know. And usually if you got a family, sometimes, you know, if you've seen Asians they use every single square inch that they can in their garden, and they're building trellises and doing all
Even at the
sorts of.
community gardens over
Yeah.
on Center Street, they really make beautiful gardens there.
But that's what you have to do to make that 2.5 acres work. Is you have to be really,
Yeah.
and you can't have a big
Efficient.
house on it.
Oh, right.
Right.
House, big
You know, and
garden.
that's going to be one of the real tricks is how to balance that as, you know, how do we get food? Like now we're importing it 2,000-3,000 miles, you know.
And then how does this all jive with the space age? Like,
What?
are we supposed to stop, you know, exploring and the frontiers of science and stuff? Or is it possible by not being consumers anymore? I mean, if we reduce our consumption, can we still progress, like, into the future with electronics and science and that kind of thing? Or are they mutually exclusive?
Boy, I don't know.
Well, I think it depends. Well, like generally, rocket fuel is not using oil-based
Oh, yeah, that's
things.
true.
All right, so that to me, you know,
Whole different era. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have to give up our science and our, you know.
I don't
our
think so. It's just we have to
striving and all
use
that.
our science more effectively to get what we want. I mean, I don't think it takes a 2,000-pound car to get me, you know, to work.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah, that is pretty primitive.
and so
Very
you know,
nice.
we need to start thinking. I think in terms of what do we really want to do. And I mean, if you think about it, what makes a lot more sense instead of everybody driving their own car, is to have decent public transportation. So you don't need that.
Right.
But I mean, most of the places where I've lived, the public transportation cuts out, you know, before some of the shift workers get to go to work or come home from work, and so
It
now
needs
you're
to be
stuck.
24/7, pretty
Yeah,
much.
pretty much.
If
I
it's
mean,
going to be effective.
and like a number of places, I've lived in some fairly large cities, they stopped running. I remember in Sacramento, they stopped running the light rail at midnight. Well, I got off work at midnight. I had 8 minutes to make it to the light rail station,
Or
and I had to
else.
run flat out to make it. And if they decided they were a little early, I missed it and had to walk home. So, I mean, there are, you know, problems, but that's just getting A to B. And like, see, one of the reasons why I moved to Salem is that I could walk most of the places I wanted. There was a Safeway close
That
to
is
where
a
I
good
lived.
thing about Salem.
And I mean, that's what
Walk
I think
everywhere.
people need to think about too, because too many of the communities we see popping up are ones where you have to have a car, that you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
even
To get to
have.
the grocery store.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just for the basics.
Well, yeah, suburbanization was one of the worst wrong turns we ever made because of that. The amount of energy and the cost of having all those big box houses here and then getting back and forth
Getting back and forth,
getting
yeah.
the services to there. You know, actually, a city like New York City's got a way less per capita carbon footprint than a city like Salem. You know, just because of the people were packed together and the services and utilities are there.
And they
But-
walk a lot.
Well, you know, people don't like to have shared wall housing and stuff, so that we got to come up with some.
But it
to change our
reduces your
mindset.
heating bill.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But,
I mean, I learned that, you know, is that like when I went out and got a house, it's like, what happened to my heating bill? It's just skyrocketed.
yeah, but there's all those kind of things like that. People don't like to share like that. Like, why does everybody have to have a washer and dryer? Why does everybody have to have a dishwasher? I mean, why aren't people sharing those kind of things? You know, like you said, cars.
Yeah, my house. A lot of people
all
don't
those
do
things.
that.
Everybody's all that duplication. You know,
Right.
and,
Right, that's true. You should
lawnmowers.
share more.
yeah, lawnmowers.
Right.
mean,
You should have
sometimes-
like a shed out in the middle with the key and you can go
Yeah.
out and get it and use
Or
it.
like the bike sharing that some of the big cities are starting
Right.
to do now.
That's a good
And you combine them with, say, like a light rail or bus stops, and people can just pick up the bike and go the rest of the way that they need to go. And I mean, those kinds
Right.
of things make a lot more sense as we go forward. It's just that, you know, and one of the things I see is neither political party wants to get into this discussion at all. And they're basically useless when it comes to looking at the future.
Look what happened to Jimmy Carter when he put on a sweater. He put on a sweater and
instead
lowered
of
the
wearing a
thermostat, and he got
suit, yeah.
condemned. You
Right.
know, I mean, they don't want to. Nobody wants to say, "Hey, you know, slow down the party." You know?
Right, slow down the party. That's a
You know,
good slogan.
politicians aren't into that. You
Well,
know?
I had a friend that wrote "The Party's Over" when
Yeah.
and the subject was oil depletion,
Yeah.
and he was basically making that point that we are, you know, we've been partying for like a long time now, and that now we're going to
Right.
have to figure out what we actually want to do, what is necessary, what is just stuff that we like to do that we don't really need to do, and
Right.
that's, I think, one of the big things with people start to need to think about these things as they go forward about what's really necessary for me. and what's not.
Yeah, the oil, like we just were talking, the oil is, finding the oil led to this huge increase in population. You know, I mean, there was, you know, before the oil, everything weren't great either. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
if we hadn't have found oil, we would have ran out of whales. They would have been burned in grandma's oil lamp, right? So there's ironies like that that are going on too. And hopefully we can find something else, you know, and make another transition. But I think the best step is conservation. You know, we talk about, you know, energy. Conservation is the cheapest form of new energy. It's just to conserve and don't use as much. Insulate houses, like we were talking about. Do this, that, and the other. And like I say, you might think you're conserving by having a electric car, but really you aren't. You know, the thing. There's just ways we can
It's
do
like
it.
a penny saved is a penny earned. You
Yeah,
can say
there's
a therm saved.
right.
is
And I was
therm
talking
produced.
earlier about aluminum cans. An aluminum can, not only is the mining of the bauxite dangerous, basically it's congealed electricity. That's why all the Alcoa plants in Kaiser Aluminum were built near the dams in the Northwest, so they have a supply of cheap electricity. Well, you don't have to use all that electricity. You only use maybe about 5% as much if you recycle a can, the next can, you know.
That's the most
And-
important
And
thing
we
to
won't even
recycle.
get into the discussion about what aluminum does to your body.
Right.
You know, your body has zero tolerance for aluminum,
Right.
and you're sitting there with your beverages and everything else in aluminum. That's not the
Yeah.
way to go. But the thing is that those are examples of things that we need to really think about what we're doing, because I think the cost is becoming prohibitive.
Yeah. Yeah, basically the cost has been externalized all
Right.
these years onto the environment. You know,
Right,
and-
onto the environment. That's
And we're running out of it. There is no another ridge over there with an old growth forest.
Or a
We've
couple of
got-
other planets we can
Yeah,
you know,
a couple of planets.
immigrate
Yeah,
to.
like my friend I was telling you about needed 2.5 planets just to live his lifestyle.
Wow.
And
What was the name of that book that was that you mentioned earlier? We're talking about.
The World Without Us.
Yeah, The World Without Us. That
Excellent
sounds
book. It's basically
I'd like to read
a kind of a thought experiment. What would happen if all the humans just disappeared tomorrow? You know, doesn't matter how, but why.
Right.
But and
Yeah.
then what would happen? What would the planet do? And it's a great book. I highly recommend it.
Oh, okay.
Find out quite a bit.
One thing I did find out is the thing that's going to be around the longest is stainless steel. We have perfected that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say cockroaches, because they seem to be able to survive
They're gonna be
anything.
playing with the forks and the.
Well, I read an interesting thing about cockroaches last week or so, where they realized that sweet sugar is how they get baited into poison, and within 5 years they became they would avoid sugar.
They learned.
And
Well,
They
pretty
evolved.
quickly.
Hey, the thing
That's
about
evolution.
cockroaches that amazes me is they keep saying they'll survive nuclear holocaust, they'll survive everything else. What's in a can of Raid?
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
That sounds worse than a nuclear holocaust. Oh my God. Wow. Well, our time's just about up.
Okay.
Any closing thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think we'll have to come back and talk about this
Yeah.
some more, because I
Sure.
think there's a lot of different levels that
Yeah,
we
I'd
need
like to
to
come back and
discuss
talk
it at.
about ideas and maybe some examples of where people are collectivizing and using way less.
Using way
There's
less.
good examples, and Oregon's is in the
It's a good
leadership
place
of
for
that.
that.
We're like the vanguard, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So we'd like to invite Michael to come back at his
No
earliest convenience,
Okay.
and we'd like to invite you back next time for Valley View.
Thanks for watching. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Michael, wow, that was a good topic.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah, we
like
ran.
this.